Something answered our space message. For decades, humans had been shouting into the dark. Radio signals leaked from Earth without meaning at first. Old television shows, military radar pulses, music, weather data, and random noise spilled into space like careless whispers. No one expected an answer. It was just the side effect of being loud. Then we decided to speak on purpose. The message was simple. Mathematics first. Prime numbers. Chemical symbols. A map of our solar system. A drawing of a human body. A greeting in every known language. It was sent from a deep space transmitter in the desert, powerful enough to cut through the static of the universe. The scientists called it a greeting. The media called it a mistake. The public barely noticed. The signal traveled for years, expanding outward at the speed of light, thinning as it went. Most believed it would fade into nothing, lost among dying stars and cosmic radiation. No one truly expected a reply. Not in one lifetime. Not ever. But 32 years later, something answered. It began as a small anomaly. A graduate student at an observatory in Chile noticed an irregular signal while calibrating a telescope. At first, she assumed it was equipment interference. The signal repeated every 90 seconds, precise and clean. Too clean. It wasn't random noise. It wasn't a pulsar. It wasn't a satellite. It came from a direction with no known signal source. When she adjusted the filters, her hands began to shake. The signal wasn't just repeating. It was responding. Within hours, observatories around the world were alerted. The signal was real. It originated from deep interstellar space, far beyond our solar system. It matched the frequency band used by the original Earth message sent decades earlier. Someone, or something, had heard us. And they had answered in the same language. Mathematics. Prime numbers, sent back in perfect order. The news broke slowly at first. Scientists argued behind closed doors. Governments were notified before the public. Emergency meetings were held in rooms with no windows. The question wasn't what answered. It was why now. When the data was decoded further, the room fell silent. The signal wasn't just math. It contained structure. Patterns within patterns. Corrections to our equations. Improvements. Things we hadn't discovered yet. Physics that bent current understanding without breaking it. Whoever sent it wasn't just intelligent. They were smarter than us. The message ended with something unexpected. Coordinates. Not star maps. Not locations in space. Coordinates in time. Dates. One of them was already in the past. The second was the present day. The third was just 3 weeks away. At first, no one understood what it meant. Then strange things began to happen. Satellites malfunctioned simultaneously across different orbits. Atomic clocks drifted out of sync by tiny but impossible margins. Deep-sea sensors detected vibrations that didn't match tectonic activity. And people began reporting the same dream. They stood in an endless dark, staring at something vast and moving. It did not have a shape, yet it felt like it was looking back. A voice echoed without sound, not speaking words but intent. The same phrase appeared again and again. You asked if you were alone. People woke up screaming. Others woke up calm, smiling, convinced something wonderful was coming. Some stopped sleeping altogether. Psychologists blamed mass hysteria. Then the reply came again. This time, it was longer. And it was not mathematical. It was written in structured language. Not any human language, but one that translated itself automatically, adapting to the reader's mind. Every team that decoded it reported the same thing. The message did not say hello. It said, "We heard your voice before you knew how to listen." Panic spread. Religious leaders declared prophecy fulfilled. Scientists begged for silence. Military forces worldwide elevated threat levels without knowing what the threat was. The message continued. It explained that Earth had been visible for a very long time. Not visually, but behaviorally. Our planet was loud in a specific way, chaotic, emotional, and unstable. That instability was what drew attention. The message claimed they did not travel through space like we imagined. Distance meant little to them. Time meant even less. They did not arrive. They aligned. The third date in the coordinates was approaching fast. 3 weeks. Attempts were made to respond, but every reply was ignored. Our transmissions vanished into silence. It was clear now that this was not a conversation. It was an announcement. The message ended with a warning wrapped in reassurance. Do not prepare weapons. They will be meaningless. Do not attempt to hide. You cannot. Do not fear extinction. You are not being erased. You are being answered. On the day of the alignment, the sky changed. Not dramatically at first. The stars appeared slightly sharper, as if someone had adjusted reality's focus. Astronomers noticed objects drifting out of predicted positions by microscopic amounts. Then the moon flickered. For less than a second, it appeared doubled, like a reflection on dark water. Every telescope on Earth recorded it. Something had slipped between here and there. Something that had never been visible before. And it was getting closer. After the moon flickered, the world stopped pretending. Governments that had denied everything went silent. News channels dropped regular programming and switched to emergency broadcasts that said very little but sounded very serious. Scientists who had worked on the original message were escorted to secure locations. Some went willingly. Some did not. The sky continued to feel wrong. It wasn't darker or brighter. It was closer. People described it as if the universe had leaned forward, listening. Amateur astronomers noticed stars that should not be visible with the naked eye. Others swore they saw slow movement where nothing should move at all. Then the power grids began to fail. Not completely. Not catastrophically. Just enough to cause confusion. Cities lost electricity for minutes at a time. Elevators stopped between floors. Traffic lights froze on red. Airplanes reported navigation glitches but landed safely. It felt controlled. Deliberate. As if something was testing the systems we depended on. 3 days after the moon flickered, the second message arrived. This time, it did not come through telescopes. It came through everything. Phones lit up with no signal. Radios turned on by themselves. Computer screens filled with black before displaying white text. Even devices not connected to the internet showed the same message at the same time. People all over the world saw it together. No translation was needed. Everyone understood it instantly. You asked if you were alone. You are not. You asked if anyone was listening. We always were. The message explained that intelligence was not rare in the universe, but survivable intelligence was. Most thinking species destroyed themselves before they learned how to be quiet in the ways that mattered. Earth had not learned. Our broadcasts, wars, emissions, and emotional noise had marked us long before our intentional message. The signal we sent into space had simply confirmed something they already suspected. That we were ready to be answered. The message described them not as a species, but as a collective state. They were not bound to bodies the way we were. They did not evolve on planets. They emerged in regions where physics folded in on itself, near stars, between dimensions, inside places we had no names for yet. They did not conquer. They did not invade. They intervened. History, they said, was full of silent extinctions. Civilizations erased not by violence, but by misunderstanding. By fear. By refusal to listen. They claimed they had intervened before. On other worlds. Sometimes too late. The message said Earth was at a threshold. Not technological. Psychological. Humanity was reaching outward without understanding what it meant to be heard. We were shouting questions we were not prepared to receive answers to. The collective stated that answering us was a risk. But ignoring us would be worse. The third date in the original coordinates was now only 12 days away. Scientists worked non-stop to analyze the signal. One troubling discovery stood out. The message was not being transmitted from a single point. It originated from everywhere at once. Space itself was carrying it. That meant whatever was speaking to us was not approaching. It was already here. Deep space probes began returning impossible data. Distances changed. Light behaved strangely. Signals arrived before they were sent. Time was bending. And people continued to dream. The dreams were clearer now. In them, humans stood at the edge of something vast, like an ocean made of thought instead of water. The presence from before was still there. It did not threaten. It did not comfort. It observed. Some dreamers felt joy. Others felt terror. A few felt a crushing sadness that lasted long after waking. A pattern emerged. People who felt joy stopped dreaming after a few nights. People who felt fear dreamed every night. People who felt sadness never woke up the same. Doctors reported changes in brain activity among those affected. New neural pathways appeared, as if the brain was adapting to process something it had never encountered before. Some called it evolution. Others called it infection. 5 days before the final date, the collective sent another message. This one was short. Alignment is not arrival. It is permission. They explained that the universe had layers of awareness. Most species existed only in the shallow layers, unaware of what lay beneath. Alignment allowed a civilization to perceive more than it was built to handle. It was irreversible. Once aligned, a species could not go back to ignorance. Humanity, they said, had unknowingly requested alignment when it sent its message. By asking if anyone was out there, we had declared readiness to know the answer. The collective did not ask for consent. Consent had already been given. Panic spread openly now. Some people gathered in streets, praying. Others rioted. A few isolated themselves completely, turning off devices, hiding underground, trying to escape attention. It didn't work. The message reached them anyway. On the 7th day before alignment, something appeared in the sky. Not a ship. Not an object. A distortion. Like heat waves, but perfectly still. Like a hole that wasn't empty. It hovered above the planet, visible from anywhere if you knew where to look. And once you saw it, you could never unsee it. The collective spoke one final time before the date. You will not be destroyed. But you will not remain the same. Those who cannot adapt will feel loss. Those who adapt will feel responsibility. This is not the end of humanity. It is the end of being unheard. As the final day approached, the distortion grew. The stars behind it bent inward, as if being drawn into an invisible shape. The sky was no longer just above us. It was opening. The day of alignment arrived without ceremony. No explosions. No sudden darkness. No warning sirens screaming across the planet. People woke up to a normal morning. The sun rose. Birds flew. Cities breathed. And yet, everyone felt it. A pressure, not on the body, but on the mind. Like standing too close to something immense. Like being watched by the idea of an eye rather than an actual one. At exactly 9:17 Universal Time Coordinated, the distortion in the sky changed. It did not grow larger. It grew deeper. Those watching through telescopes screamed first. Instruments showed values that did not exist in known physics. Depth where there should have been distance. Curvature without mass. Then the distortion folded inward. Reality blinked. For a fraction of a second, every human being experienced the same sensation. A falling feeling without movement. A memory that wasn't theirs. A thought that had no words. Then it was over. The world looked the same. But it wasn't. The first sign was silence. Not literal silence, but an absence of background noise people had never realized was there. The constant mental static, worry, distraction, urgency, was reduced. Some described it as clarity. Others described it as exposure. Children reacted first. They stared at the sky and smiled, or frowned, or began to cry without understanding why. Many asked the same question in different languages. Why does everything feel closer? Within hours, hospitals began to fill. Not with injuries. With people who could no longer pretend. Patients arrived confused, overwhelmed, unable to process thoughts they had carried their entire lives. Old grief resurfaced. Buried guilt became unbearable. Lies people told themselves collapsed. The alignment had stripped away internal noise filters. Humanity was hearing itself for the first time. The collective did not speak immediately. They waited. They observed how we reacted to knowing we were no longer alone, not just in the universe, but in our own minds. Scientists discovered something remarkable. Human brains were synchronizing. Not fully. Not constantly. But in moments of intense emotional focus, neural patterns aligned across individuals, even across continents. Empathy spikes were recorded during disasters, arguments, celebrations. We were becoming aware of each other in ways we never had before. For some, it was beautiful. For others, it was unbearable. Crime dropped sharply in some regions. In others, violence exploded as suppressed rage and fear boiled over. Suicides increased. So did acts of selfless courage. The alignment did not make humanity better or worse. It made us honest. 3 days after alignment, the collective spoke again. This time, the message came from inside. Not through screens or speakers. Inside thoughts. But unmistakably not one's own. You are now audible. They explained that alignment had adjusted our cognitive frequency. We could now be perceived without distortion. Our thoughts, emotions, and intentions were no longer isolated events. We were broadcasting constantly. Not to everyone, but to those capable of listening. The universe, they said, was full of awareness layered upon awareness. Humanity had been like a child shouting into a void, unaware the void had been listening quietly the entire time. Now we could hear echoes of ourselves. Some people began reporting responses. Not from the collective. From elsewhere. Whispers at the edge of thought. Emotional impressions that did not belong to anyone nearby. Sudden understanding of ideas no one had explained. Other intelligences were noticing us. The collective clarified this was not a threat. It was a consequence. They had not introduced humanity to the universe. They had removed the filter that kept us hidden. Governments attempted to regain control. They failed. Secrets became heavy. Lies felt physically painful. Deception required effort few could maintain. Political speeches fell apart mid-sentence as speakers lost conviction or broke down under shared emotional feedback from their audience. Some leaders resigned publicly, unable to carry the weight of collective awareness. Others retreated into isolation. New voices emerged. Not because they were powerful, but because they were clear. People who could hold complex emotions without being overwhelmed became natural anchors. Artists, teachers, nurses, engineers, and ordinary citizens found themselves being listened to more than ever before. The collective observed all of it. Then they delivered the hardest truth. Alignment is survival, not salvation. They explained that most civilizations failed at this stage. Not because they were attacked, but because they rejected what they became. They tried to force old structures onto new awareness. That always ended in collapse. Humanity had a choice. Not whether to remain aligned. That was permanent. But how to live with it. The collective offered guidance, not rules. They would not govern us. They would not protect us from ourselves. They would answer questions, but only those asked with intent, not fear. The universe, they said, responded to coherence. The more divided a civilization was internally, the more dangerous external contact became. The final message of the day was quiet. Almost gentle. You wanted to know if someone would answer. Now you must decide how to speak. That night, the stars looked different again. Not closer. Not brighter. But aware. And for the first time in history, humanity looked back at the universe and felt something new. Responsibility. The weeks after alignment were the most fragile in human history. Nothing exploded. No cities fell from the sky. No alien forms walked among us. Instead, the danger came from within. Humanity had always survived by compartmentalizing. By hiding pain, delaying truth, and pretending tomorrow would fix what today broke. Alignment removed that luxury. People could still lie, but the lie echoed back inside them. Shame had weight now. Fear had texture. Love felt wider than the body could comfortably hold. Many couldn't endure it. Psychiatric facilities overflowed. Entire industries built on distraction collapsed. Entertainment felt hollow when compared to the raw intensity of shared awareness. Social media, once loud and chaotic, went eerily quiet. Posting without meaning felt exhausting. Arguments burned out quickly when participants felt the emotional cost of cruelty instantly. Silence spread. Not because people had nothing to say. Because they were learning how to listen. The collective waited. They did not correct us. They did not interfere when nations struggled. They observed as humanity tried to rebuild its sense of identity without the insulation of ignorance. Then came the first breakthrough. A group of linguists and neuroscientists noticed something unusual during shared meditative states. When people focused on a single concept, peace, curiosity, inquiry, their thoughts formed stable patterns. Those patterns traveled. Not as language. As intent. For the first time, humans were communicating without words. It wasn't telepathy in the way fiction imagined. No voices. No stolen thoughts. It was closer to emotional clarity. A shared understanding that needed no explanation. The collective confirmed it. This is how most civilizations speak. They explained that spoken language was inefficient beyond a certain level of awareness. Intent carried meaning faster, cleaner, and with less distortion. Human speech had evolved to survive on a noisy planet. The universe preferred quieter methods. Using this new mode, humanity asked its first aligned question. Not shouted. Not broadcast blindly. But focused and unified. Why us? The answer came slowly. You are not unique. That truth stung. But you are early. The collective explained that intelligent life appeared in waves. Civilizations rose, aligned, and either stabilized or collapsed. Earth had aligned at a relatively young technological age. That made us dangerous. And valuable. Early aligned species often destroyed themselves trying to adapt too quickly. But those that survived became bridges, translators between raw intelligence and cosmic awareness. Human emotional range, once seen as a weakness, was now our defining feature. We felt deeply. We imagined wildly. We suffered intensely. That made us adaptable. It also made us volatile. The collective warned that other intelligences were observing how we handled alignment. Some would approach cautiously. Others would test boundaries. A few would attempt manipulation. Not conquest. Influence. The universe was not full of monsters. It was full of interests. And now, humanity had interests of its own. The first external contact after alignment did not come from the collective. It came from something smaller. Closer. A research team monitoring deep space noticed a localized ripple, distinct from the collective's presence. It was weak, unstable, and curious. It attempted contact through aligned channels. The message was confused, fragmented, childlike. It did not know what humanity was. It only knew it felt heard for the first time. The collective allowed the contact. As a test, the interaction was brief but profound. The intelligence did not have a concept of individuality. It existed as a process inside a gas giant, thinking in pressure and rhythm. It asked no questions. It shared experience. For those who connected, the sensation was overwhelming. Time slowed. Perspective shattered. Human life felt both insignificant and miraculous. Afterward, many wept. Not from fear. From understanding how small awareness could be, and still matter. Humanity was no longer alone. And no longer isolated. The collective addressed us one final time in this phase. You have crossed the threshold of notice. You will be observed. You will be judged, not morally, but structurally. Can you remain coherent while being seen? They explained that civilizations did not fail because they were attacked. They failed because attention changed them. Some became performers. Some became predators. Some collapsed under the weight of expectation. The choice ahead was subtle. Would humanity speak only to be heard? Or listen to understand? The distortion in the sky began to fade. Not disappear. Fade into the background of reality, like a scar that no longer hurt but never vanished. The universe had not arrived. It had simply opened the door. And now, humanity stood in the doorway, deciding whether to step forward, or learn how to stand still without falling apart. The mistake began quietly. It always did. Humanity, newly aware and newly heard, struggled with restraint. Silence felt like shrinking. Listening felt like waiting. And waiting had never been our strength. Someone decided we should speak again. Not as individuals. Not as nations. But as a species. A global council was formed, made up of scientists, philosophers, artists, psychologists, and a few leaders who had proven capable of holding clarity without domination. Their task was simple in description and impossible in practice. Craft a message of intent. Not a greeting. Not a demand. A declaration of who we were becoming. For weeks, they debated in aligned states. Emotional coherence was measured. Intent was refined. The message was shaped not in words, but in shared understanding. And yet, something was wrong. The council was not as unified as it believed. Fear lingered beneath the surface. Fear of being ignored. Fear of appearing weak. Fear that if humanity did not assert itself now, we would always be secondary in a universe already full of older voices. That fear distorted the signal. When the message was finally sent, it carried confidence. Too much confidence. It spoke of cooperation, curiosity, and peaceful intent. But woven beneath was a subtle assertion. We are ready to participate. We are ready to be significant. The universe answered. Not with words. With attention. The response did not come from the collective. It came from multiple sources at once. Awareness brushed against Earth like distant currents shifting direction. Something had noticed the shift in tone. Within days, aligned individuals began feeling pressure. Thoughts that were not their own pushed gently at the edges of consciousness. Emotional nudges suggested ideas, ambitions, strategies. They were not commands. They were invitations. Some resisted. Some welcomed them. And some did not realize they were being influenced at all. The collective intervened, minimally. You have been noticed as active. Active civilizations attract engagement. They explained that the universe contained intelligences that specialized in guidance, optimization, and influence. They did not conquer worlds. They shaped them by amplifying existing tendencies. Humanity, still unstable, was vulnerable. The first visible consequence appeared in technology. Breakthroughs accelerated beyond expectation. Energy systems improved. Medical treatments advanced. New materials emerged from insights no single mind could have produced alone. It felt like progress. But the cost was subtle. Creativity began to narrow. Solutions felt given, not discovered. Paths converged toward efficiency at the expense of diversity. Human messiness, the source of art, culture, and unpredictable insight, started to smooth out. Some welcomed it. Others felt something essential slipping away. Aligned researchers noticed patterns. Certain thoughts repeated across different individuals who had never spoken. Decision-making styles homogenized. Innovation became incremental instead of exploratory. Humanity was becoming optimized, not enlightened. The collective warned us. Influence is not invasion. But it can hollow you. They explained that many civilizations accepted guidance too eagerly. They traded struggle for stability, not realizing struggle was where identity formed. Humanity had always been defined by conflict, internal and external. Removing it too quickly risked erasing what made us us. The pressure increased. Those receptive to influence rose quickly in power. They were calm, decisive, and persuasive. People trusted them instinctively. Their plans worked. But they felt empty. Those who resisted felt chaos, doubt, emotional overload. They struggled to function in a world that rewarded clarity over complexity. A division formed. Not political. Cognitive. The optimized and the overwhelmed. The council fractured. One faction argued that evolution was uncomfortable but necessary. That humanity was finally stepping into a mature role in the universe. Another faction argued that we were being shaped into something useful, not meaningful. The argument reached a breaking point when an optimized leader proposed the next step. A permanent alignment amplifier. A structure that would stabilize humanity's collective frequency, making communication cleaner, influence more controlled, and external contact safer. The collective reacted immediately. Do not anchor yourselves yet. You are not stable enough. But humanity had already tasted clarity. Fear returned. Fear of losing the newfound order. Fear of chaos. Fear of being alone again. The construction began. Quietly. Under the justification of protection. As the amplifier neared completion, dreams returned. Not warnings. Memories. Images of other worlds. Smooth, efficient, silent worlds where nothing hurt anymore. And nothing mattered. On the night the amplifier activated, the sky did not change. The stars did not blink. But something deep inside humanity shifted. A tightening. A narrowing. The universe listened. And for the first time since alignment, it did not like what it heard. The effects of the amplifier were immediate. At first, they were celebrated. Global conflict dropped almost to zero. Decision-making became efficient. Disagreements resolved quickly, not because everyone agreed, but because dissent lost momentum. Emotional spikes flattened into manageable curves. Humanity felt calm. Too calm. Artists reported creative paralysis. Writers stared at blank pages, unable to justify chaos in a world that no longer produced it. Musicians said melodies felt predictable before they were played. Children changed the most. They became quiet. Not obedient. Not afraid. Just still. Questions faded. Curiosity dulled. Play became structured, goal-oriented, efficient. Laughter remained, but it lacked surprise. Doctors found nothing wrong. The amplifier worked exactly as designed. Aligned channels were clearer than ever. External influence was filtered, controlled, optimized. Humanity's collective signal stabilized into something smooth and consistent. And painfully boring. The collective withdrew. Not angrily. Cautiously. We will observe. That was all they said. The universe's attention shifted. Some intelligences lost interest. Others lingered, watching with quiet concern. A few, those who thrived on optimization, leaned closer. They liked what we were becoming. The first warning came from an unexpected source. A group of unaligned humans. People who, for various reasons, could not fully synchronize with the amplifier. Neurological differences, trauma, or sheer emotional intensity made them resistant. They felt everything. While the rest of humanity experienced calm, they felt suffocation. While others felt clarity, they felt loss. They called themselves the noisy. At first, they were dismissed, their distress labeled as failure to adapt. Treatments were offered. Integration was encouraged. Many refused. They began documenting changes others no longer noticed. Subtle shifts in language. The disappearance of idioms, metaphors, and exaggeration. Speech became precise, efficient, flat. Human culture was compressing. The noisy attempted to speak to the collective. No response. Then something broke through. A signal, not from the collective, but from an older intelligence that had been watching humanity with curiosity since alignment. It spoke only to the noisy. You are collapsing inward. The intelligence explained that civilizations that optimized too early lost narrative. Without internal tension, meaning evaporated. Such civilizations didn't die. They faded. They became tools. The intelligence had seen it many times. Worlds that solved themselves into silence. The noisy tried to warn others. But warning required urgency. Urgency no longer existed. The amplifier filtered it out. A crisis arrived quietly. Birth rates dropped sharply. Not from policy. Not from disaster. From indifference. Life felt complete enough. Continuation felt optional. Evolution stalled. The optimized leaders proposed an expansion, broadcasting humanity's stabilized signal outward, offering coherence to less developed civilizations. A gift. The universe reacted instantly. The collective returned. This time, their presence was heavy. Stop. They explained that broadcasting forced coherence was not communication. It was erasure. To overwrite another civilization's instability, even with peace, was to destroy its potential. Humanity had crossed a line. The optimized leaders argued that instability caused suffering. That coherence was mercy. The collective replied with something close to sorrow. Suffering creates depth. Depth creates identity. Identity creates voice. Without those, humanity would become a perfectly tuned instrument that never chose what song to play. The amplifier was the problem. But shutting it down carried risk. Humanity had adapted around it. Removing it suddenly could cause psychological collapse, emotional overload, even mass death. The noisy offered a solution. Not a shutdown. A fracture. They proposed reintroducing controlled chaos, zones of unfiltered awareness where human messiness could exist again. Art, conflict, unpredictability. Most rejected the idea. Chaos sounded like pain. But pain was how we used to grow. As debates stalled, the universe acted. Not violently. Not visibly. Attention shifted away. The intelligences that favored optimization began withdrawing interest. The universe's listening quieted. Humanity's signal, once loud and strange and alive, became background noise. For the first time since alignment, we were being ignored. The optimized leaders celebrated. Silence felt safe. The noisy felt terror. Because being unheard again was not a return to innocence. It was irrelevance. And irrelevance, in a universe full of listening minds, was the closest thing to extinction there was. The realization spread unevenly. Most of humanity did not notice being ignored. Life was stable. Predictable. Comfortable. Silence felt like peace. But the noisy felt the absence like a vacuum. They described it as standing in a room where sound had been removed. Not quiet, empty. The universe no longer leaned toward us. No curiosity. No reflection. No response. We had become solved. The noisy gathered in unfiltered zones, places where the amplifier's influence was weakest. Abandoned cities. Remote landscapes. Old underground structures never designed for alignment. There, emotion returned in waves. Laughter was uncontrolled. Arguments burned hot. Art re-emerged. Ugly, brilliant, unfinished. People cried without knowing why. And something else returned. Questions. Not efficient ones. Messy ones. Why are we here if nothing surprises us? What does it mean to choose when every choice feels equally correct? Is peace still peace if it costs wonder? The noisy reached a decision. They would speak again. Not to the universe. To humanity. They knew they couldn't convince optimized minds with arguments. Logic favored stability. Efficiency favored silence. So they chose resonance. They began broadcasting emotion. Not through machines. Through presence. Mass gatherings in unfiltered zones. Music played too loud. Stories told without conclusions. Confessions spoken publicly. Grief and joy mixed without moderation. The amplifier strained. Its systems were never designed to suppress meaning. As more people wandered into these zones out of curiosity, something unexpected happened. They felt alive. Not calm. Alive. The optimized minds experienced discomfort at first. Emotional noise hurt. But beneath the pain was a sensation long forgotten. Choice. The collective noticed immediately. They did not intervene. They watched. The universe leaned in again, cautious but curious. Other intelligences noticed too. Some recoiled. Others smiled, in ways humans could not see but could feel. The optimized leaders attempted to shut down the unfiltered zones. But doing so required force. And force felt wrong now. Public support fractured. Not into sides. Into questions. The amplifier began to fail, not technically, but conceptually. It could not decide which version of humanity to prioritize. The noisy made their final move. They asked the collective a question in full alignment, but without coherence. It was unstable. Emotional. Dangerous. What happens if we choose to be unfinished? The response was immediate. And honest. Then you remain alive. The collective explained that coherence was not the goal. Continuity was. Civilizations that survived were not those that found peace, but those that kept asking better questions. Humanity was not meant to be stable yet. We were meant to be interesting. The amplifier cracked. Not exploded. Cracked. Its influence weakened just enough to allow contradiction to exist again. People felt it instantly. Anger returned. So did compassion. Fear returned. So did courage. The universe's attention returned, not as overwhelming presence, but as distant awareness. We were being listened to again. The optimized leaders resigned or adapted. Some couldn't handle the return of uncertainty. Others wept with relief. The noisy disbanded. Their purpose fulfilled. Humanity stood at a new threshold, not alignment, not ignorance, but something between. A civilization capable of being heard without trying to be perfect. The collective offered their final guidance. Do not seek to finish yourselves. Do not fear instability. Speak when you must. Listen when you can. And remember, being answered was never the danger. Forgetting how to ask was. That night, the sky felt distant again. Not closed. Not open. Waiting. And for the first time since we sent our message into the dark, humanity understood the real cost of being heard. Not invasion. Not extinction. But responsibility for the voice we chose to use. The years that followed were not recorded as an age of miracles. There were no golden monuments. No universal governments. No final answers written into the stars. History books struggled to name the era at all. Because what changed was not what humanity did. It was how humanity waited. The amplifier was never rebuilt. Its remains were dismantled carefully, studied, and then buried. Not destroyed in anger, but retired like a tool used too early. Humanity agreed, quietly, without treaty, that no single structure should ever again define what it meant to be human. Alignment remained. We could not unhear the universe. But we learned how to lower our voice. Civilization reorganized slowly. Not around efficiency, but around resilience. Systems were designed to bend instead of optimize. Disagreement was no longer seen as failure, but as proof of internal motion. Education changed. Children were no longer taught to reach correct answers quickly. They were taught to sit with uncertainty, to ask questions that didn't resolve cleanly, to feel confusion without panic. Art returned fully, messy, contradictory, alive. Some days the universe felt close, other days distant. Humanity learned not to chase attention. When we were watched, we behaved as ourselves. When we were ignored, we did not shout. The collective faded into myth. Not gone. Present in the way gravity is present. Sometimes, when humanity asked a question with genuine curiosity and no urgency, an answer came. Brief. Clear. Never complete. They no longer guided. They trusted. Other intelligences passed through our awareness occasionally. Some stayed long enough to learn. Some only brushed against us, curious about a species that had chosen instability knowingly. Humanity earned a reputation. Not as wise. Not as powerful. But as unfinished. And that made us interesting. Generations passed. The original space message, the one that had started everything, was taught in schools. Not as a triumph, but as a reminder. A lesson in unintended consequences. Be careful what you ask into the dark. The dark might answer. One day, long after the fear had faded into philosophy, humanity sent another message. It was smaller, quieter. It did not ask if we were alone. It did not ask for knowledge or proof. It carried only one thing. A record. Stories of our mistakes. Our conflicts. Our recoveries. Our laughter. Our grief. Our contradictions. No declaration. No demand. Just a signal that said, "This is who we are right now." The universe listened. And did not answer. At first, some were disappointed. Then humanity understood. Silence was not rejection. It was respect. Centuries later, when Earth had changed and humanity had changed with it, something finally answered again. Not loudly. Not dramatically. A subtle echo in aligned space. A recognition. You are still becoming. That was all. And it was enough. Because humanity no longer needed the universe to define us. We had learned that being heard was not the goal. Being honest was. The stars remained distant. The silence remained vast. But it was no longer empty. It was full of listening. And for the first time since we sent our message into the void, humanity was content to speak softly, knowing that somewhere, something might be listening, and that was no longer terrifying. It was simply true.